Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of real estate, appraisal, and everything in between. Whether you're just starting to explore the appraisal profession or measuring your career in decades, this podcast is for you. I'm Kevin Hecht, Appraisal Training and Development Manager at McKissick. And each week, I'm thrilled to bring you expert insights, thought-provoking conversations, and stories from industry leaders, innovators, and disruptors. From education and industry news to marketing tips, tax strategies, and even a few war stories, we cover the topics that matter most to appraisers and real estate professionals. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Numbers. I'm your host, Kevin Hecht. Thanks for tuning in as we explore the people and ideas that make an impact in the world of real estate and valuation. Today, I'm really excited to sit down with Susan Alley. Susan's the founder and CEO of Appraisal Aid. And if you're in the appraisal world, you know how important quality and compliance have become. She spent over 28 years in the industry wearing just about every hat: loan officer, real estate agent, appraiser, business owner, and now educator and consultant. And we're going to talk to her about her journey, why she started Appraisal Aid, and some of the big challenges appraisers are facing today, and where she sees the industry heading. So Susan, welcome to Beyond the Numbers. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So I always start the podcast with the first basic question: how'd you become an appraiser?
Believe it or not, I used my degree. And so I had a degree, Bachelor of Science in business, and then an emphasis in real estate and finance, which back then, really, there weren't colleges that were doing real estate. So it was kind of a novel thing. And so when I got out of college, I had taken like business law and a real estate appraisal class and real estate law and some different things like that. And I got out of college, took me about 5 years to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up, bounced around a little bit, was in property management. And then actually it was my mom. I don't know, she always loved houses, and we always went to go look at houses. And sometimes that also meant trespassing, which I did not realize when I was growing up that that's what we were doing. But looking back, and so she was thinking about becoming an appraiser, and she had all the books and everything like that. And she never did it, and I can't remember because it's been a really long time, but that's kind of what prompted me to look into it more. And I found a company that was near where we lived, and I had three supervise. I started in an office as like in the front desk, as far as checking appraisals before they went, gluing the pictures on there, sending out the pictures to be developed, doing the fish cards for the property data information. So that shows how long ago it was.
Say, you're kind of dating both of us there, because I would remember the same things.
And it was, I had the option back then to I had a job offer from them, and I had a job offer from Bank of America, which is became ultimately or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Bank of America, Boatman's, and in their relocation department. And the relocation job paid about $10,000 more a year, but I decided to go the route of appraiser. And so uh, I worked as, in the office for a while, and then they started training me, and it evolved from that. And then after I had my son in 99, that's kind of when like the digital cameras first came out. And I had a Sony CyberShot 1.3 megapixel, and I thought it was awesome. It was, and so once I was able, they had that, and the sketching programs then just came out. And so I really didn't need to be in the office for that. And with having a little one at home, I decided to kind of go out on my own and work from home. And so that's kind of how I had an appraisal company called appraisemyhome.net back in the like .com beginnings and everything. I couldn't get .com, but I got .net. So appraisemyhome.net was my appraisal company in St. Louis.
So I don't think most people probably don't know this. We're from the same area. You don't live here
Yes.
anymore, but I do remember Boatman's Bank for one. That's going way back.
Uh-huh.
And uh, so you were kind of and I do remember your website, your appraisemyhome.net. You were kind of one of the early adopters to the web from what
Yeah.
I
I
remember.
well, I had a website. I don't think I really did anything with it. So, that's but, and the kinda cool thing about it that I never thought about was people thought we were a lot bigger than we were, and I mean, I lived in Kirkwood. We did ultimately have an office in downtown Kirkwood, which I loved, but when people would meet us, they thought we were way, way bigger than what we were. So, go big, go home.
Right. And I think that's one of the things a lot of appraisers, looked at when they talked about adopting technology and going on the web and all that. But yeah, quite a career journey, if you will. So that kind of leads us to where you are now. So first question is what inspired you to establish Appraisal Aid? And we
Well,
talk
I wanted
about the appraisal process all the time, right? How do you address the challenges that you see in the appraisals that you come across your desk?
Well, as far as how I kinda got here, I would have never thought I would, because I consider what we do is kind of in the compliance and quality arena as far as on the review side, and, I probably would have remained an appraiser in the field. I moved to California, and then I moved back, to Florida and started doing reviews for the company that I worked for, and, it was a lar when I moved out to California, I was still doing appraisals, but then they were purchased by an AMC. And so then I started working for them. And then that's kind of when everybody was navigating as far as having to do these USPAP compliance reviews. And so I developed the form for them. I mean, it was sitting down with my USPAP book. I hate to say this, but, I probably did not appreciate I know I did not appreciate USPAP as much back then. I was one of those, I took my 15 hours when I needed to, then I took my 7 hours update. But when I had to develop the form, I had to sit down and read line by line to make sure that we were reviewing, to make sure reports were reported according to standard too. So that's kind of how I ended up with that. And then, um, you know, that got me into the compliance side. I worked there. And then my mom had real bad health issues. Had PLS, which is like the non fatal version of ALS, and which it affected her speech and mobility and things like that. And it came to the point where I had to make a decision. I was feeling kind of guilty as far as trying to keep up with a corporate job and take care of my mom. So I chose to leave there and just kind of contracted out for a while. But then one of the things that I realized is that um, these USPAP compliance reviews were being performed, but the feedback wasn't getting to the appraisers, which, when you're working with large AMCs and they're busy doing a
Yeah.
million different jobs, um, it's they don't really have the time or the manpower to be able to get that feedback to the appraisers. So, when I developed Appraisal Aid, I took the knowledge from doing these reviews over many years, as far as what the most common deficiencies were, things that increased risk exposure, and things like that. The I've had on my review form when I developed it, I have had market condition questions since day one. I have also had a question on there as far as if the 1004 MC and the neighborhood section differ. and value trends if they discussed it, because that was something we saw a lot. So I tried to develop a form that not only um, met the state requirement, or the state requirements of reviewing for USPAP compliance, but also the most common items that were deficiencies that could also increase risk exposure. Because I figured if people were paying for this review, they might as well get the most bang for their buck. Because nobody really wants to do, ask any AMC, they do not really want to do USPAP compliance reviews. So, but like, view is actually one that we have. Is there any external factors that were they addressed in the report, or were they not? And it's kind of surprising that some very readily obvious ones uh, are sometimes not caught because we're using templates. I mean, I use templates and things like that. And so in your template, it usually says neutral residential. Well, that can get you in a lot of hot water if you're not paying attention. I mean, I've had them where they've backed to interstates. I've had and no trees in between, and it still said neutral residential. So that's something that can definitely increase the risk exposure. And from working in a large AMC, I also saw repurchase demands, so I was also aware as far as the common items that were within a repurchase demand, which the two most common items were unsupported adjustments and alternate sales. Alternate sales is is one that usually appraisers can explain why they didn't use particular sales, but unsupported adjustments or not sufficient commentary that's still one of our highest deficiencies that we see. Um, Highest and best use is another one, and highest and best use, you know, I um, I was at the IAC meeting, you know, last in March, I guess it was, and there's been studies on highest and best use, and it's very well known that it's an issue, but I think appraisers may think they're addressing it in their appraisal report, because I've seen a half a page giving me the definition, giving me the items that are considered, or they'll take it straight out of use, perhaps saying the relevant physical, legal, whatever characteristics, but they never come back around and summarize the support as it pertains to the subject. So, um, I don't know. One time, I posted a very quick video after being frustrated one day and reading so many rural reports that said, due to the zoning and the surrounding properties. And I'm like, there is no zoning and there is no surrounding properties. So I don't know. Those are some of the as far as some of the common deficiencies that we see that can
Yeah.
also increase risk of exposure.
So a couple of things in what you're talking about. First of all, let's go back to talking about USPAP and how you had to go line through USPAP. As a USPAP instructor, one of my things is always to remind appraisers, take some time to look through USPAP. Don't just take the 7-hour class. Like you said, you got to make sure you understand it. Now, I mean, I can't quote it line by line, verse by verse, but it's important to understand it and take it, for what it's worth, not just that 7-hour thing you have to do every 2 years. It always cracks me up when I teach a class in November before the new version of USPAP is supposed to come out in January, and there's 40 people in the class. So for the 2 years preceding that, they didn't know what the new USPAP said, and that just makes me shake my head sometimes. Um, but on your website, and hopefully I'm not misquoting this, but on your website, you said that there's a mention that 92% of the appraisal reviews have USPAP deficiencies.
I think it's like 80 something, I don't know, or it's a large percentage, yes. Most appraisals have minor deficiencies that may not affect the overall credibility of the
Right.
report,
But
but it's still a deficiency that, at least a minor deficiency, or Um, so yes, there's very a very small percentage pass with no deficiencies, a very large percentage pass with deficiencies, and then occasionally we do have the fail or minimally acceptable. Um, we have several different kind of review types, and the one that we started with, which is a little more comprehensive, is we do quality scores on those too, just to kinda because an appraisal report may not fail, but it may have items that increase the risk exposure because I am very pro appraiser. I know I've met appraisers and they feel like reviewers are the enemy, and I'm very pro appraiser, and I try to, I try to look through it through their eyes, and I try to support them and give positive
Yeah.
feedback when I can, and so, but I don't know why appraisers hate reviewers so much.
Uh, and I agree, and that's something I always talk about. Look, reviewers are your friend. They're there to help you stay out of trouble. So take their advice and listen to what they have to say. I mean, every reviewer that I know, and I've done a lot, my fair share of reviews, and I've managed reviewers and I've managed appraisers, and you know, the reviewers are there to do a job to help make sure that, first of all, their client gets a report that meets their requirements and, to your point, mitigates their risk, but also to help educate the appraiser. Sometimes, we kind of get into that rut where you're talking about, using templates and using and just cloning reports. And I'll be honest, when I was in the field, I was the king of cloning reports. Worked in the same areas a lot, and but that can get you in trouble. And sometimes the reviewers can catch that before it goes through. Or even if it's after, then at least hey, I need to make sure that I double check this or I change whatever the statement is. But I think that the industry, and this is kind of the next phase of the review process, right? The industry is changing. And I think as we move to the new UAD and the new URAR, we're going to rely less on check boxes and filling in the blanks and more on the analysis, more on the appraiser's expertise. Do you have, I don't know if you've seen the new UAD yet or heard anything about it, but in terms of the changes that are being put out there, how will that affect the review process? And do you think it's a good thing for appraisers under the new URAR?
I know a lot of people are scared of it. I mean, we don't like change. So, when the digital cameras and sketches came out, everybody's like, "I'm not doing that. I'm
Yep.
out of here." And I think, and because we are an older profession, and we particularly don't like change, but, I've seen enough of it, I think I'm hoping that the new form will help, provide, like, kinda take maybe help with the highest and best use issue and some other issues. It'll be interesting to review as far as, I haven't looked at one from a reviewer's perspective yet, is like, to go through and see how easy it
Yeah.
will be to get through for that. I just think, change is always scary and intimidating, but I think that ultimately the people that stick it out, I think it's gonna make things better, and for us to stay relevant, I know everybody's, especially during COVID, was worried about, you know, the waivers and things like that. And I still remember being at, I think it was my first expo that I went to, and somebody from FHA was speaking, and appraisers were all up in arms about how we're not going to be around and this and that. And I remember the woman from FHA saying, as long as you provide like meaningful reports, and that has stuck with me because I feel the same. Sometimes I see reports that it says the exact same thing, like an appraiser's report. It says the exact same thing in every appraisal report,
Yeah.
and, if we don't make it meaningful, we're not gonna be needed because if we're not providing, good support, meaningful commentary, just because you put a lot of words in an appraisal report does not mean it's good.
It's a very good point. That's a very good
And
point.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think it'll be a good thing. I think it's I do think it's gonna be hard, for a lot of people, and I think it's scary because just from the experience of, small of changes before, and, and but I think the people that stick it out, I think it'll provide a better, it'll be better.
I think, again, just my personal opinion, and I've had exposure to it as part of the education process. I think it's going to help appraisers demonstrate their worth more than just filling out the form. But if you think about it, when the 1004 came out, everybody was all up in arms and saying, this is going to kill me. I'm not going to do this. And yet we adapted and we
Right.
adopted the form and everybody figured it out. And even from when it came out, we've seen changes as USPAP changed, then it changed the requirements. And you know, appraisers don't like change, but as a group, they tend to be fairly adaptable, which I think is interesting because we always default to, oh, this is the end of the profession. I tell this story, and I won't use the person's name, but I can tell you later who I'm talking about. I've been in a business since 1987, and the very first event that I went to was there was like in the old days we had the happy hours, and so there was mortgage companies, title companies, appraisers, real estate agents, everybody from the business getting together. And this was 1987. And my mom owned a mortgage company. And she took me and she introduced me to an appraiser here in St. Louis and she said, hey, this is my son. He's getting into the business. And the appraiser said, well, enjoy it now because you won't have a job in 3 years. And how many times have people heard that throughout their career? I mean, I probably hear it at least once a year. And yet, to your point, if we can demonstrate why what we do is so important, there's always going to be room for appraisers. But this is one of my soapbox issues that I talk about a lot. We have to make sure people understand the value that we bring to the mortgage process. It's not just about the number we put on the bottom of page two. It's about the analysis we provide. It's about the information that we give the reader of the report. And I think that kind of flows into some of the USPAP issues that you see because people aren't going through each step. They're just going through doing what they've always done. Um, so I think
Yeah.
the change is inevitable, but I also think that it's going to be a good change for appraisers. But when
Yeah.
we talk about change, when we talk about the what we do as appraisers and what you've seen and the problems that keep coming up, if you were going to give an appraiser advice on how to make sure that they're maintaining those high standards, what advice would you provide to help an appraiser be a professional and be of value to their clients as we move forward?
I think, putting thought into what you're doing, I think we get on autopilot sometimes. Um, and also remembering that the people that are reading your report may not be familiar with your area at all. So, like location adjustments, the appraiser may know very well why one area is different than the other. But a lot of times I don't see that communicated in an appraisal report because it's like they know and they forget to explain. I always use like as I've been trying to take the time to put together course. You know, one of the things I had in there was the power of why. I was like, why, like thinking of those things as far as why is it better? And not only like location, but, and now with Fannie Mae, definitely wanting to see more support for, whatever the market trends are. And then also, adjustments, quality and condition adjustments, just saying they're inferior or superior really doesn't help me. I like what was different that led to the conclusion that it was inferior or superior. And that little extra commentary will strengthen the report and it will also those kind of things better reduce not only the client and the AMC or the banks or whoever's risk exposure, it also reduces the appraiser's risk exposure because I feel like if the commentary is meaningful and thorough, then it's also less likely to maybe be the subject of a Fannie Mae repurchase demand or a repurchase demand as far as because I feel like once that red flag is raised, and even when I'm reviewing, if it starts falling apart, like there's that little thread, and then you're kind of looking at it a little more critically and a little more critically. So I think if there's thorough commentary and support to start out with, you're not gonna start finding those little threads as much or not looking for them as much. And so,
Right.
um, and sometimes it's even saying why you didn't do something. Like, I've seen condition, um, ratings be different within an appraisal report, but they don't explain why they didn't make the adjustment. So, not just stating why you made an adjustment, maybe why you didn't make an adjustment. Or
Yeah.
I've seen like a 2-year-old house in a 60-year-old house. There's no age adjustment, no condition adjustment, no anything. And I'm like, okay, so you didn't make the adjustment, so you don't really need to address why you made an adjustment. But from my perspective, I'm like, I really want to understand why the 2-year-old house and why the 60-year-old house are considered equal. So keeping that in
Yeah.
mind too, as far as, not just commenting on the adjustments you made and supporting the adjustments you made, but also addressing some of the things that you didn't do that to the person looking at it might be like, why didn't they make an adjustment? So I
Yeah.
think, that's just as important as far as sometimes not just addressing that and as far as
Yeah.
what you did do, but also sometimes what you didn't
What
do.
you
I say that all the time in USPAP class. I say sometimes it's more important to say why you didn't do something, even than sometimes why you did do something. But what you're saying then is the statement, this adjustment is based on my 30 years of experience, isn't really going to hold up. Is that?
No.
I've seen that in two different reports.
I don't see it as much as I used to, and I still see it some. And if you're going to say it's based on market reaction or contributory value, you need to state the recognized methods and or techniques utilized to derive and support those market reaction adjustments or contributory value adjustments, and also stating within an appraisal report that you don't know what other appraisers do is not sufficient because within USPAP, I can't remember where it says it, but it says we are responsible for keeping up to date with you know current methods and techniques.
Yeah.
Recognize methods and techniques.
Yes. So
That's
saying that you don't know what other appraisers do doesn't,
Yeah.
doesn't work either. And also making sure, and this doesn't show up in an appraisal report, and this of course is not anything that I review for, but I think it's really important, is because sometimes I feel like stating paired sales. I wonder if paired sales, stating everything was developed according to paired sales, is the new based on my experience or new based on market reaction contributory value. And if you're going to say that it is based on paired sales, you better darn have that in your work file because I don't know, I think sometimes it's, just generally used because they know that, based on my experience, based on market reaction, based on contributory value doesn't really fly anymore.
Yeah.
And so then, whatever methods and techniques you say you're utilizing, you better have support just in case you ever need it.
absolutely. I think that's critical. And I think it's going to be more critical as we move forward. Well,
Yeah.
Susan, as we wrap things up, well, first of all, how can people contact you if they want to reach out and utilize your services?
They can always they can always reach us through our website. There's a contact form there, appraisalaid.com. It's AID. And then, or you can reach me personally at Susan at appraisalaid.com. But yeah, so we do the USPAP reviews. And I was thinking as far as appraisers, getting upset sometimes about things and being pro appraiser, we even do for like banks, we do pre closing reviews. And that if it's a minor deficiency, we pass it on and notate it. But if it's a deficiency that increases risk exposure, we go back to the appraiser. And we do get good feedback from the appraisers because I always let
Good.
them know that this is helping reduce their risk exposure.
Right.
And they've always been very grateful for that feedback. I think it's how you come across to the person. If you're antagonistic going in, that's the response you're going to get. But if you come from a place that you're trying to help them, I think that can be seen and makes a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And again, I encourage everybody, every appraiser to build a relationship with the reviewers because you tend to work with the same reviewers for the same clients. And so I think that's a great way to improve what you do. And again, to move the whole profession forward. It's not just about that one report. I think that's something that's important to remember.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Susan, as we wrap up, any last parting thoughts or pieces of wisdom that you want to share?
I think I've covered most of it. Like I said, just remember we're not the end. I had one appraiser tell me we were their mortal enemy, and I was like, no, no, I am not your mortal enemy. I really do want to help appraisers, and you and I have talked as far as I do want to kind of do some educational offerings just because of the data that we collect.
Yeah.
I think we can really use that to help appraisers, improve the quality, strength, and compliance of their report. And that makes them stand out to clients too. So,
Absolutely. It's a very good point. All right. Well, that's going to be a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Numbers. A big thanks to Susan Alley for joining us, sharing her experiences, her insights, the story behind Appraisal Aid. And I think one of the takeaways from the discussion is that, if you have the right tools, if you have the right education, if you're committed to quality, an appraiser can navigate the challenges that we face today and come out stronger on the other side. So as Susan said, if you want to follow up, go to appraisalaid.com and you can find out more information about her services and the company. So thanks again for listening. If you've enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, share Beyond the Numbers with a colleague. I'm Kevin Hecht, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all very much. Thanks for tuning in to this week's Beyond the Numbers. If you'd like to stay at the forefront of appraisal news, boost your career, or just learn more about the profession, be sure to subscribe to Beyond the Numbers with McKissick Appraisal at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for stopping by.